In a world where innovation and research are the lifeblood of the future, where does the idea of communication come into play? Sure, a great solution may become realized in a minuscule lab anywhere in the world, but how do those researchers ensure that their work is heard about? More importantly, how can they make sure their research is communicated accurately? To answer this problem, we turn to several researchers working in the Florida Museum of Natural History in Gainesville, Florida.
Dr. Dennis, if you could please give us a little introduction of yourself, name, role, any fun fact you want to throw in.
So I'm Jared Daniels. I'm the director of the McGuire Center for Lepidoptera and Biodiversity at the Florida Museum of Natural History. I'm an insect ecologist and conservation biologist, and I work primarily on at-risk insects, primarily butterflies and native insect pollinators.
I'm Dr. Chase Billingsley-Kimmel. I am the postdoc in the lab.
My name is Trudy Durgee. I work here at the McGuire Center for Lepidoptera and Biodiversity.
My name is Matt Standridge, and I am a research assistant in the Daniels Lab at the McGuire Center at the Florida Museum of Natural History.
How do you feel that science is communicated nowadays?
Oh boy, that's a good question. So I would say generally science, or a lot of times science is poorly communicated. I think it's inherently important that we communicate what is the value of science to the public, that they understand the process steps of science.
What is your stance on how science is communicated today?
Science communication is something that I think will only become more important. I think sometimes, whether it's this day and age with media or politics or what it is, science sometimes doesn't always get the best rap, and I really wish that there was better science communication so that people could understand the complexity of some of the problems that we're facing in the world.
Whether it be understanding how to pick the right food for your family, making political decisions, evaluating every element of your daily life. It is inherent in pretty much all that we do, and that it's not just the pure scientific method that you learned in high school. It's a much deeper way of talking about and asking questions.
Technology has definitely helped with the spread of new information, but I also think that with that comes a lot of roadblocks. I've noticed personally when I'm trying to, write a research paper or, do a peer review or even, start writing my own stuff for any sort of journal. Those papers are hard to get to. There's a lot of paywalls and there's a lot of secrets, quote unquote, being kept from the public that are not necessarily, scary or bad. They just, there's some sort of pretentiousness that comes with being in a research paper, and I don't really understand it. If you're going to write a paper and you want people to read it, why not make it completely public? So that's one of the things that I think is a shortcoming when it comes to research being communicated, especially with technology.
That's a tricky one because there is a balance between conveying information honestly and also in a way that people can understand. So that is something that we kind of struggle with when we go and talk to different groups of people.
I myself struggle at reading certain scientific papers because they're very dense, they're complex, right? And so you need to have someone that can interpret those or have researchers that can put them in basic language for people to understand. The difficulty that scientists have is sometimes these issues are so complex, it's difficult to simplify something where there's a lot of different factors involved.
Putting it into more general terms would help, taking these papers and kind of summarizing them in a way that people could understand might be more helpful, but then at the same time, it almost makes it so simple that you don't get the actual point across. So there's kind of a weird dilemma with that.
And so we try to overly simplify them, and sometimes that gets us in trouble as well. So yeah, I think the most important thing is, I think given our in-tuneness of social media and videos and photos, I think presenting material that people can understand it in, say, visual ways, say communicating visually, instead of having these written articles, in addition to those, maybe having video journals just saying, hey, this is what we did, this is how we did it, and this is why it's important. Having different forms of media to explain that, instead of just having a written old school text.
That's sort of the traditional university, or a lot of the historic method is a traditional university method. You send out a press release, or you have videos running on, TV late at night, and highlights or whatever of researchers. And I think we have to be much more dynamic in how we communicate science. And so,
what do you think could be a solution?
Well, I think we went through a process with the museum, with actually the School of Journalism and Communications, about how students are getting their information. And I think we have to be much more nimble in setting it out in a whole bunch of different pathways. Obviously social media, and I think for a lot of what we do, we're working with incredibly charismatic things. A picture isn't going to do that justice, but video can do it justice. So video through Twitter, through Facebook, through other media, I think even the short snippets of video, it has to be dynamic. Science is inherently dynamic, and we work with incredibly wonderful organisms. I mean, if you can't sell a butterfly or Florida panther or Burmese python, you're really in trouble, right? So we have to make that accessible and fun and engaging. And I do think we also have to make science fun.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the work that we've done here just in my lab, we've paired up with First Magnitude Brewing and tried to take the conversation to the community. And if people come to the Florida Museum, they're self-selecting. They're coming because they're already interested, theoretically, in natural science. But if you go to First Magnitude or another place in downtown Gainesville, those people may not have even heard of the Florida Museum. And so the idea is to make it social, make it fun, and make it engaging. And if they learn a little bit in the process, everybody wins. It doesn't have to be this 10,000-pound elephant to, having it that way. It has to be short, simple, fun, engaging.
It has to widen net.
It has to, yeah, exactly, and dynamic. I mean, that's, you have so much competition for that narrow bandwidth right now.
Attention.
Yeah, people's attention. So you have to make it dynamic. You have to make them want to skim down and click on that, and that's what we have to do better.
I also think that doing a lot of like public outreach, like we go to a lot of schools, we go to a lot of outreach events with UF campus.
That's why I like going to schools and working with kids, because I feel like that's one of the easiest audiences to communicate what we do to. You can do it in very simple terms without talking down to them. They get it, they're excited, and they definitely ask some of the best questions that we get whenever we do outreach.
So now we've heard the opinions and views of several expert researchers on the matter, but what does an expert in communications have to say on the subject? Introducing Dr. Telg.
My name is Ricky Telg. I'm a professor in the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication. I've been here at the University of Florida about 25 years now. Started here in 1995, so next year will be 25 total. I'm also the director for the University of Florida Center for Public Issues Education, or as we call it, the PI Center. I think that scientists could always do a better job of communicating science to whatever public they're talking about. A lot of scientists, most, pretty close to all, probably have never had any class on either how to educate or how to communicate. I mean, that's very true. If you're in one of the hard sciences, it's very unlikely that you have any class in your dissertation, in your doctoral program specifically, that provides you with a context of why it's important to communicate or to educate the public about your science. And as a result, they go through all their 3 or 4 or 5 years of doctoral coursework, and they get put into a position as an assistant professor, and then a reporter comes and puts a microphone in his face and says, "Tell me about this," and the person is stymied, doesn't have any clue about how to answer the question, doesn't know anything about communication points and to make the information to the reporter that ultimately goes to the general public easily understandable. Is it his fault or her fault? Kind of, but he was never taught that. So one of the things I'm very encouraged by is the recent emphasis on helping to provide some type of training for our scientists, for our researchers, to give them an understanding about what it takes to effectively communicate their science to general public. So one thing that we've learned in communications research, especially over the last decade, is that we still are involved with what's called the deficit model. Deficit model really refers to, here I am the scientist or the expert, and I tell you, Mr. General Public Person, everything that you need to know because you are operating at a deficit, because I have more information than you do. We just keep hitting you up with more information, and the result, our hope, the result's going to be is that you're going to change behavior or attitudes or whatever. And what we've learned over time is that that is not the case. Just because you give people more information does not mean that they're going to change anything. What instead we need to be looking at is, how do we engage people? How do we create this dialogue, which is what's called the dialogic or dialogic model, in which the idea is that we work together and create some synergy. So I have information, you have information, I have this conversation with you, whether it's face-to-face in real time or at distance. I provide information, but I also hear what you're having to say, just like a conversation. And just like in any conversation, it's give and take. And there is this human element involved there when you have this idea of dialogic communication or this dialogic model. So to me, that's one of the things that we're working on more and more of the case here at the University of Florida is, yeah, we have a lot of information, but we're teaching our faculty, our current faculty, how to have those conversations here at the university as well as around the community. There's more of these kind of pop-up science cafes that are happening where there are faculty all across the Gainesville area that are communicating about their science to people, normal people, not necessarily the people that they would typically go talk to, which is their colleagues at a conference, at an academic conference somewhere. So being able to communicate that way, and then infusing some of those same communication concepts in classes, in seminars, to teach the scientists of tomorrow how to communicate their science to a general public or to a specific audience. I think those are very encouraging steps that the university is making to help to tell the science story here and elsewhere, no matter what the field happens to be.
That is really important, and then I wish we'd have more of a conversation about science, not a one-way pathway of science. So I think that's really important because there's so many critical issues right now that we have to really make sure that people are not afraid to ask questions, that we're not putting up walls, we're having opportunities to have those conversations. And I think that's really critical because I think people really want to know, but are they getting the right information? Are they getting it in a way that they can actually ingest? And to have it more conversational than one way, I think is really critical.